Good afternoon, all. Good afternoon for people watching us from Nigeria, watching us from Cameroon, from Ghana, from South Africa, from Ivory Coast, from Kenya, from Rwanda, from Tanzania. Good afternoon, all the people interested by the tech industry. Today we are having Mr. Christopher Lafayette. He's a French name, but he's a U.S. And we meet him at the tech events, and he's a very inspiring speech presenter. And we're gonna ask him 3 questions about how the techs, is it the fintech or other category of tech, can affect economic growth in our country, and why is it so important for our government to start looking at how we can finance innovations and how innovation can change the game in our economy. We cannot just be farmers or civil servants. Tech can also create great industry. We thank him so much for taking the time to speak to our youth, which is very important because they will appreciate it. We thank you so much. I will never have enough words to say thank you to him, but before the beginning of an interview, I will ask him the first question. Good afternoon, Mr. Christopher Lafayette. Can you introduce yourself to our audience?
Thank you, Alicia, for your kind words and your great, very endearing expressions. And I hope to be of some value with the words I'm expressing to all of you in Africa that are embarked into an era of opportunity and technology that we've in a lot of ways have expected to come, but we didn't expect this technology to arrive so early. And we're really at a place in time in science that we're able to understand even just a little bit more, but the little bit more that we're able to understand in science is much more expansive collectively than what we may have been able to understand within easily the past 100 plus years. And so the work that Africa has out for its future endeavors of what's to come and what is necessary and needed from the African ecosystem as a whole, north, south, east, and west, from Ivory Coast to Kenya. What is needed is greater access, broadband. What is needed is capital distribution from governments. It's time for governments and public sector to play a stronger role in the African ecosystem. It's time for governments to understand that when you distribute capital and the money and the wealth and fuel the startup culture and build startup culture from lab to funding, lab to market, what you end up getting is prosperity not only for yourself but for your people within the land itself and who you represent. And so the need and the express need for venture capital, government funded grants, and distribution and deployment of products that are coming from these sciences that we are embarking upon, especially when it comes to AI and the metaverse and emerging technologies as a whole, now is the better time to ever do it in a large sense of the way and fashion that the continent missed out on the opportunity for the applications revolution. It missed out on the opportunity for the information age, and it continues to sit last of all continents when in some regards, given the wealth of its history, the wealth of its resources, the amount of its people, the vast diversity of culture and representation, where the continent could be the leading continent of all continents. And it's not to necessarily divide for superiority, but it's to lead with a sense of imbued responsibility on how we go about it, whether it's for the sake of sustainable growth of the technology itself in applied sciences, or whether it's for the opportunity to be able to help develop and bring whole entire communities into the virtual world, and to, which is the big one, to unlock the opportunity that's latent within the land that we still do not know to this day the prospective bandwidth of what the continent has to offer in terms of innovation. And so I'm really looking forward to seeing that happen and in an express fashion.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much, sir. I have, first of all, two questions based on the speech that you have done. You spoke about the artificial intelligence, and you spoke about the metaverse. Let us start by those, and then you will come to the other part of your speech. How do you think that the artificial intelligence will change the culture, the life, and the business in the U.S., and is that applies to African country too?
Sure. Well, by way of Convergence, which is a framework that I've been working on for years, and it's had really dramatic growth through, by way of Convergence, of 54 technologies abide within the greater eco-habitat, which ultimately leads and translates into 270 technologies. Artificial intelligence and human culture are the two main culprits, if you will, that affect the whole ecosystem in its entirety, being humanity and artificial intelligence by way of, at the moment, generative pre-trained transformers buoyed by or carried forth by these large language foundational models. And so when we think about the metaverse in AI, the metaverse in some respects and in wide respects is the interface to AI. And, you know, we talk about the user interface and user experience. Well, the interface and really the playground of AI intentionally has been the metaverse. For it to operate within a virtual ecosystem, and so anywhere that you can see mankind operating within the metaverse, so can AI. That's always been the intention, because AI is an extension from human intelligentsia coming from and being made into artificial intelligentsia. And so the two marry up incredibly well, and they marry up incredibly fast. And so it's igniting, it's accelerating. And the reality is that the technology in some respects has become more advanced than the technologists. And so even those in the technology community are being outpaced and outdone by these innovations that are accelerating. They're not new, they're just growing within the habitat itself. The habitat is a very live and vibrant place, but it's also very volatile, these technologies that abide within the habitat. And so we can expect to see a lot more contribution of tech as a whole to consumer, enterprise, public sector side as we continue to go on. Once the tempo and the cadence of technology adjusts and it accelerates, we know that there is more to come, inevitably. And we've never been this way before, but we are attempting to measure the accelerated speed in which the progress is happening, but it's ongoing work.
Yes, sir. So I have two questions also. You spoke about how, because in many African countries, when we started to talk about crypto, so there were a few scams so that crypto were banned. There is one country which is called Central Africa, where the president is a mathematics professor, which said that it's a mistake to ban the crypto. So he launched what is called Sango Coin, and he says he's working toward to have his country fully connected with crypto. I even has his contact, Mr. Touadéra. So people doesn't understand him, but he requested in African country to change the rule. First of all, I wanted to know, do you believe in crypto and why? And the second thing you say is that it will be possible to launch stuff in the metaverse and pay with crypto. Do you think that will be possible, and how can he bring the economic growth in a place with Africa country where just 3% of people has a bank account?
Sure. So I do. I'm a huge fan of crypto assets. I am a huge fan of blockchain technology, not only for distribution of crypto assets, altcoin, meme coins, but the science that prevails within it. I remember that we once were privy to a study that was happening in UC Santa Cruz on distributing the human genome through the blockchain, and what a fascinating study of work that was and that is. And so when I think about the democratized access of crypto assets and blockchain technology, what I like most about it is that it has the operational ability to work within virtual settings at creating essentially a layer one. And by way of this layer one chain technology and distribution of crypto assets, I like that it challenges fiat currencies. I like that the idea is to be able to purchase real world commodities using these assets. And ecologically, it certainly does challenge the ideals of operational environments and societies as a whole, where you can enter and ingress into these virtual environments and buy, sell, and trade these crypto assets. And you can buy commodities direct as a consumer from farm to market. Usually it's what we're used to, but you're be able to position yourself to really go from farm to door. And so looking how this evolves and how this changes in that fashion, you really do position yourself in some ways to be able to create these cities that could one day be as widely known and well known as real physical cities. And so one day I can see us referring to a virtual environment that's the size of an entire city, state, or country. And this is in the area in which people operate. In some ways, we see that now with marketplaces like Amazon, where if it converts into a virtual city, it has a populace of millions of people.
Exactly.
And so when we think about the fundamental tenets of the idea of it, it's not so far off. It's rather progressive compared to where we're at now. All we are doing is really laying down the foundational work to extend into hyperreal. And so, yeah.
Okay. Then I have another question. You spoke about how the tech is changing way of doing business in entertainment, in logistics, in sport, in culture, in construction, and many different sides of how to do business. First of all, what is important for a local government in developing countries, especially in those African countries? I wanted to highlight, because if you are having a meeting with a minister in some African country, he doesn't understand the importance of investing in the broadband and the high-speed broadband. First of all, what's important in invest in high-speed broadband if you want to have tech companies? The first thing. And the second thing, it will be like the industry of entertainment. When you travel in many African countries, apart from Nigeria and South Africa, many local creators, singers, filmmakers have gave up. The reason why they have gave up is because of piracy. You launch a film today, and tomorrow everybody copy and sells it in a market, and the government cannot afford to fight in all that. So, do you think that today the technology can help the music creators, the film makers to change the way they do their business and be more protected and sell. And like I said, my first question, what's the importance of launching the broadband if we want to have tech company in African country?
Firstly, broadband should be a human right. There shouldn't be any debate about this at this stage in the game. Secondly, when you're able to give access and guidance to whole entire communities that haven't enjoyed such access before, what you're able to do is unlock their potential. And they're simply able to innovate and to be able to contribute to the greater development that's happening in the world right now. And the fascinating, intriguing consideration to this is that in a lot of ways, the native innovation of Africa and what can be prevalent, what could prevail by way of this cultural finding could be game change. One, because we'll get a sense on the innovation in delivery and distribution and deployment of new products. We'll get translative interpretation on technology that's already being consumed and developed and made and distributed out. And on a amorphous scale, we'll be able to see what dishes make. Look, there are dishes that are made of the same name, but made very differently in different places and locations. And if we don't understand what can come from the African ecosystem, then what it does is it really throws off the balance opportunity of technology and development as a whole. Well, why is that? It's because we live and share one Earth, one planet. And every continent has a responsibility to contribute to its sustainability of Earth itself. We're more symbiont than we sometimes realize. And the more we remain fragmented and alienated from one another and disconnected, it ultimately leads towards our divide. The more connected we are, the greater flow in the path of communication can accelerate with delivered information. And undoubtedly, the greatest technology that's been developed within the past 30 to 50 years is communication itself. And so for us to be able to configure into telepresence and to create more open channels of communication for distribution of methodologies and ways to sustain, that's a really big deal. But we cannot exchange information to benefit one another, to medicine, to dealing with and exploring and understanding the human body and sickness and ailments and pestilence and pandemics and endemics, and to be able to understand and share science and things that can reveal more to our scientists and practitioners and those that explore in life sciences.
Yes.
Without proper connection, even to the remote parts of the world that have something to contribute to technology and science as a whole and the understanding of science, without that, we end up hurting our own selves, and we could benefit from the information that comes from the other side of the world based on the information that you gave someone else that could do something with it and deliver it based on something that they've been working on. And so, just because we have siloed geographical maps, it doesn't mean that we have to operate in that as such. And so, the metaverse is disrupting the contemporary map. It's disrupting the lines of geography. And the metaverse is saying, hey, just because countries and cities and states and townships and continents operate within geographical lines, within the metaverse, we don't have to be subjected to those limitations. And so we're able to build more.
So I have another question, which is come to the tech and education, because you spoke about the tech and education. Africa has a major challenge today, which is that many youth go to school, but what they learn, it means that what they call the unemployed diploma. It means that you easily see someone who sells vegetable on the market with a PhD on his pocket, because the content of education it has does not match the needs of corporate. You spoke about tech and education. How do you think that technology can help African country today to build a new education system, for example, by bringing the content or the curriculum of what we teach in universities today? Because we have promoted a school in Africa, which is the name is MB Code, and in that school, we learn to young folks how to do coding. And what's happened is that someone who has a master in marketing, after spending 1 year to learn coding, immediately he goes into the job market. So there has to be a change on how we address education, the content on the education. What do you think? Do you think that the technology can change the game, and how African can take advantage of the technology to rebuild his education system and make education accessible, especially for people living in a rural area?
I think it depends on the form of education. On one side of the narrative, I get excited about what could happen by way of self-learning with AI. You know, that's one thing. But on the other side of the scale, while we're mindful that...
What do you mean by self-learning with AI, sir?
That means being absent of a physical teacher or a student, the relationship between student and machine with AI. And these AI platforms will not only to be able to deliver hard skill and level up, and even through gamified learning, but also soft skill level up as well. Teaching them how to interact with other pupils by way of the metaverse, whether they're interacting with NPCs or whether they're interacting with actual people in virtual environments. And there's something to be said about the prospective efficiency of being able to teach not only young people but old people, because we're talking about education, and education is multi-generational. And the opportunity for us to, in some ways, when it comes to education, is really spectacular, because there's new forms of systems that will disrupt these old traditional norms. And Africa can create its own ecosystem of education, unlike anything we've seen before. But certainly every other country in the world can also, and every other continent. And so I believe the first step is to get proper access in broadband and to adopt and adapt to tools that really we will see how it's being applied and used within the systems of Africa ecologically. I think the worst thing to do is to take a defined approach to education and place that on any country that's not used to that. I think it's incumbent upon the country itself. I believe it's incumbent upon the country itself to develop its own protocol, its own process on how it wants to be educated. And when that happens, now all of a sudden, instead of building a venue and telling the people, come and join, you've assembled the people, they're already assembled, and you're saying, here's the tools to make what you think and how you see fit. Okay. Africans are educated, yes, but to catch up to the modern world and the ethos of business and to compete healthily, that's where they need to really come in and find their own. And so what may be good teaching and educational practices for the UK may not necessarily be the best approach for Senegal and vice versa. Exactly. So I do believe in a sense of agency when shown how to apply tools to build your own. And I believe that there's a lot that can happen with that, because if we introduce an educational system that has, somewhat success, or greater or less, but even on a modicum level, and we never gave the people of Africa an opportunity to develop their own, we might be limiting ourselves all the way around. So if the educational system that we would introduce to the African system, if that had a native beginning, then let the African community have its native beginning and develop its own way. But give them the tools and the access to do it.
I have another the question before the last one. Today, many African countries are looking forward to bring foreign investor and foreign investment in the tech industry. The young African today is able to do the same thing as the young Chinese, as the young Singaporean, and the young folk which is in Germany, for example. And the only thing is that they are looking forward to have investment. We've been seeing in a country like Ivory Coast, the government of Ivory Coast have been built a tech center of 2,000 acres, a very modern tech center, which is will be investment of $1 billion with a high-speed broadband, because they want many young folks to start their business, to start their company. Today, a country like Nigeria is partnering with the Bill Gates Foundation to Bill Gates will convince American investor to bring investment in Nigeria. We'll be seeing Mark Zuckerberg traveling to Nigeria, and we'll be seeing other people from the tech industry in the US traveling to Nigeria. If you was about to advise a government official in an American country, what would you tell him in an African developed country? What would you tell him in terms of how you can do to work with US investor and venture, and what you can do to bring investment from US to our country? It means that have US companies start up, partner with local company to catch up opportunities in local country. One example, when you look at Central Africa, there is more than 100,000 lorry or trucks which travels to deliver goods in different countries. But usually the owner of the company do not have an efficient system for the security of his lorry and to be able to make a good tracking on his country. So the driver may stop his lorry somewhere and do another business for 2 days before moving the truck. So there is a real need to be able to secure the investment in the transport and logistics. So my question is, for example, there is a need, and you have young folks who tells you that this is our startup. We are at the early stage, but we need more money or partnership to move forward and to be able to do a great service offer to those people who own more than 100,000 lorries, just like in the US. So which advice will you give to the local government in terms of, first, how do you work with the US to bring investment? Second, what do you have to do to be able to convince foreign investors to come and invest in our country in the tech industry?
Well, I'm going to be very candid right now.
Yes, sir.
Africa needs to make a deal with itself. Africa has enough wealth and capability at this moment to be self-sustaining. And it's far too fragmented within Africa, its countries and cities. Yet in some areas there's strong unification, as you know. The idea is to become industrious and introduce technology now with what you have and deliver it to market. I'd like for Africa to make a deal with itself collectively across the entire continent in championing the idea of being innovators. In so doing, when you deploy your innovation to the global markets, we don't want to ask investors to come and join us in Africa. We want investors to seek Africans out.
We want investors
to seek Africans out. In other words, it's one thing for me to have a bakery and I ask everyone in the neighborhood, please come and try my baked goods, my muffins and my cakes. But if your muffins and cakes are so good, at some point others will tell people about it and you won't have to seek anyone out. They will come and seek you out. There's too much innovation in Africa not to accelerate right now. The Chinese, the Americans, and the Europeans, if all of these continents can innovate, then so can the continent itself. There's no excuse. What I believe what needs to happen in Africa, and this is what I hold to you, Africa needs its leaders and a leader to help unite every willing country and city in the continent, to help guide them towards new opportunity of innovation. But the few things that are lacking in Africa, which I do believe they need to go outside for help, is they need technologists that understand where we're at the moment.
Okay.
And these technologies need to travel to the continent and help guide this group of committed leaders of Africa and its citizens, its companies and corporations, public and private sector, startup and nonprofit and social enterprise. And these technologists need to help guide Africa. That is your early blueprint. And in so doing, you'll find everything that I think will be permitted for you to gain.
So my last question will be, how do you think that African country can bring more capital? Because you have said that, you have pointed the fact that in the US, California, although Texas tries to challenge, but California is the first state in terms of investment in technology with the Silicon Valley, because all the top venture capitals are over there. So I know venture capital, you can have a strategic GP like Apple, like Google, like Microsoft. How those, or you think that African country can do to bring capital from the US, because there's a bunch amount of capital. There is a study of Joseph Stiglitz who says that a big company in the US have has $6,000 billion money in their retained earnings. So there's a lot of money, and there's a lot of need abroad to develop the tech industry. How will you advise local policymaker of the sector in Africa to do or entrepreneur to do in terms of bringing money from the U.S. or capital from the U.S. to finance the local tech industry?
I think we need to create a Silicon Bridge between Silicon Valley and African countries itself, and to, just as we do with our Asian communities, because I've been in Silicon Valley mostly my entire life, and I've seen a lot of Asian communities build, survey, and set up shop within Silicon Valley, and they're there to this day. And I believe we need to do the same for African countries as well. And in order to do that, we need to build relationships between my state of California and African continent as a whole. And so those should be the next steps, but proactively done. If all this ever does is live on a podcast interview, then what have we done with the time that's been given?
Okay. So, the now mayor of Los Angeles, she was the one taking care of African country when she was in Washington. Do you believe that that can help, for example, to make the decision and moving forward? It's up to you to answer. You can.
I would say Silicon Valley, Northern California, Bay Area, not LA.
Okay. Okay.
The money is in Silicon Valley. The business, the processes and methods, the connections, the community, the hacker community, the good hacker community, the resources is in Silicon Valley. What Southern California is really good at is media and storytelling, and they're vibrant when it comes to the artistic culture of the state of California, which is necessary. It's another reason why California is the fourth largest economy in the world, is that we understand artistry incredibly well, and we understand technology incredibly well. So when you take these two technologies and marry them together, liberal arts and emerging technologies, when you have that formula, when you pair and bind that together, you have probably the strongest approach towards technical development itself. To take the arts and to take something that's technical is really, and in some ways, almost the embodiment of product delivery that in large way has more cultural influences than what you're probably accustomed to experiencing in anything that's delivered in the product ethos itself. You know, I think about California and the native culture, the native inspiration of the land, and it serves as an inspirational point for many of us when we're building and designing and hacking and making and coding. And I wonder how that we can create artistic communities in Africa on that level of vibrancy with that much consumption and marry that up with native technology. I'm really excited what that can look like, but the most important thing when we're building is humanity first. And anything that we build in Africa or anywhere in the world, we must take in consideration of accessibility and education and equality and community development, safety, privacy, wellness, ethics. Those matter the most. If you don't have that, then quit everything you're doing, because you'll do a great disservice to yourself and to humanity itself.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much for taking the time to answer to our questions on the name of the youth who will watch the video. I would like to thank you for taking your time, because you know you are very busy traveling from California to here, and it is an honor for us to having you. You taking the time to speak to youth, and to all those youth who will watch the video. It will inspire them. I think that they will keep the faith in what they are doing, and knowing that there is a great opportunity coming, and in investment in the tech industry. If you have one word to close the interview.
Peace be with you in everything that you do, and may the Creator's love be abound in your hearts and minds.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.